you to Black Fret, Matt and Ben for supporting music and supporting musicians in the music industry. We in Shoreline really appreciate that the creative economy, the creative culture is really a lead driver of our economy, and we want to make sure there's a place for the creatives in our community and in our economy now and into the future. And as we emerge from this recession, we know it's going to take kind of an all hands on deck approach to find the resources and support one another, and help folks find their way to our creative offerings in our local economy. So couldn't say thank you enough to Ben and to Black Fret, and to Laurie Kearney for being with us tonight. Laurie is a gallery owner and a publicist and founder of Capitol Hill's Ghost Gallery, co-coordinator Capitol Hill Art Walk, and has a lot of great insights I think all of us can draw from whatever it is that we draw people to Shoreline for, whether it's music or other arts or food or other just types of culture. Culture is really broadly anything we don't need to do for survival, right? That's what we call culture. That's what we call behavior or habits or routines or whatever you want to call it. And I think there's a great opportunity for us to learn from this discussion tonight. So I'm looking forward to the discussion, and it looks like it'll be an intimate affair. So we'll have plenty of time to all get to know one another, which is great. And of course, if more people join us, it'll be the more the merrier as well. With that, I'll turn it over to you, to Ben, to take it away.
Great, thanks, Nate. I guess first off, when we decided to do this event and we booked it, I'll say, we realized after the fact that tonight was the presidential debate, the first one. So the timing was not great, but still appreciate those of you that have tuned in. And I assume we'll probably get some more as things go on. So I feel like we're very lucky to have Laurie Kearney here tonight. Laurie's been, as Nate mentioned, has been involved with our music community and the arts community, a bunch of sort of things that really make Seattle, Seattle. I think that the work she does as a music publicist, and then with the music, running the art gallery and everything else will really, there's a lot to understand about the role that plays in our community, but then also for people that are doing that kind of work, some of the expertise and things that she may be able to offer tonight in our conversation about, how there's things that you can do that if you aren't in a position to hire a publicist or things like that, what might those be? And get some tips and pointers here. So real quick, Laurie, hey, thank you for coming.
Yeah,
and sorry. So I guess the first things first is you moved here in 2005, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm curious, what drew you to the Pacific Northwest? You lived in Colorado before, or you were going to school?
I was in Richmond, Virginia.
Richmond, Virginia, okay.
Yeah. So, I had a friend move out here in the early 2000s, and I came out to visit them a couple times and fell in love with the city. There's a lot of similarities between Richmond and Seattle, especially back then, with this small city vibe that was really appealing. And so I kind of finished my degree and I was like, let's give it a try. And yeah, I stayed.
So, you mentioned that you got an MFA. And you came out here. So obviously the work you've done with the art gallery and the art walk and things, I mean, that ties into that. Maybe tell us a little bit, how did you transition to becoming a music publicist? What was that road like to take that? And were you just a music fan already, or did you see the connections between the work you did in visual art, or tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I've always had a connection between art and music. I started playing bass at 16, also picked up hammered dulcimer and played in a lot of bands while I was living in Richmond. And then going to art school. So there's always been a strong connection there. And when I moved out here, my goal was to open up a gallery at some point. That was my main focus, and remains a very strong focus, although I would say my music work and my gallery work is pretty 50-50 right now. And I, there's so many built-in connections between musicians and visual artists that it just felt really natural. And you know,
You always throw the best parties.
yeah, it was about 6 years ago with Riot Act Media. Joan LeMay hired me on to be her assistant publicist at that time. And I was doing it very part-time along with running the gallery, and I just loved it so much. So I've started taking my own clients after she retired, and yeah, it's a great team. So
tell me a little bit, what you talked about wanting opening Ghost Gallery. Tell us a little bit, you know, what goes into starting an art gallery, and you know, what sort of work did you did leading up to it? Because I think we all, I don't want to say fantasy because that makes it sound like it's not obtainable, but we all have these ideas of things we'd like to achieve. How did you go about putting the steps together to do something like that?
It was sort of a unique start, you know, not having a lot of capital to start with, and having this big dream. And it's actually why it's called Ghost Gallery, is in 2006, I started just approaching small businesses and galleries and restaurants and bars saying, hey, you know, you have wall space. I know some artists. Can I put some shows together for you? And that's how it started. And so I slowly grew a network that way. And it wasn't until 2009 that I actually acquired a brick and mortar space along with 4 other women as a shared space. Yeah, so it sort of has been this evolving project over a number of years, which you know, isn't necessarily typical. You know, it's very expensive to start any business, as we know, and especially with commercial rents, you know, they're pretty astronomical, even now. So, yeah, right. So I was lucky to transition from a pop-up space to then finding a affordable brick and mortar.
Right. So tell me, excuse me, a little bit about how you went from being a gallery owner and being, I mean, in essence, when you open a business in a neighborhood or something, you become part of that large neighborhood and you start to meet people. Was the creation of the Capitol Hill Art Walk, was that something that you saw as a way of like, how can we get more people here? Or was it a way of trying to connect to other people in your community? I mean, what was your thought process around doing something like that? And maybe start with that, and then I'm going to ask you a couple other questions.
Capitol Hill Art Walk was actually around long before. It used to be called Blitz Art Walk, and Ellen Kearney and Janine Anderson were running that, and it was volunteer based. So it was already happening on the hill, and then, you know, they had a small sponsorship, and I believe it was with Sound Transit back in the day, and so they were able to do some outreach and start growing the art walk organically. And then I believe it was 2012, you know, I got approached by Capitol Hill Block Party, and they were interested in sponsoring Art Walk. And so I put them in touch with Janine Anderson, since it was, you know, her thing. And then we wound up forming a new committee with a sponsorship through them and The Stranger. And so that I, you know, clarify that. But then since then, it's been able to grow via the sponsorship, and really to celebrate the community and bring more people here. And
So, I mean, I think one of the underlying things that we think about when we think about the role that arts and culture, music play in city and how it connects people, you know, was the Art Walk, in your opinion, was it about trying to create audience to view the art and purchase art from artists, or a secondary purpose? Like, what do you think the sort of multiple roles that played, and what were some that were successful, and, you know, did you get the results you wanted, and where do you think, you know, obviously post-pandemic, where do you think you'd like to devote time trying to expand the reach of that at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think, you know, that's definitely a large goal, is to, you know, provide opportunities for artists, get more eyes on their work that lead to sales. You know, artists have been struggling heavily in Seattle for a long time. There isn't a lot of assistance available. And so the Art Walk is one way. You know, people can walk into a non-intimidating non-traditional gallery environment in a lot of these situations and see art on the wall that they connect with, and purchase, hopefully, and if not, at least feel that culture and understand that, art, the original Blitz logo was art is everywhere, and we really carried that through, because it's true. Just, a lot of people moving to the neighborhood, that might be more tech focused or not necessarily art collectors and intimidated by the whole stereotype. I think Art Walk really helps to break down a lot of that.
Right.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit, I mean, from a marketing standpoint, so when you got the Art Walk going, tell us a little bit about like, how did you build awareness about it? How did you try to build audience? Were there any discoveries along the way about maybe the way it was marketing when you first came in, and then how you thought about promoting it after that fact?
Yeah, definitely utilizing social media heavily. It's this great, basically free resource, and staying educated on what people are using and how people want to be fed information. So, we had a website established, but then also really growing our Instagram and Facebook page and Twitter, and engaging with other people and really focusing on that, and encouraging artists to do the same, because it's a team effort across the board. So yeah, that's probably a key.
Right. Out of curiosity, well, obviously you're dealing with a visual medium with visual art. What was your sort of strategy or thinking around the posts that you did, like the ones that performed the best when you were marketing these different events? Was it tied to a really compelling image? Was it tied to more a specific event that people were into? I mean, I'd just be curious, for people that are watching or thinking about this in the future, if they're watching the recording of it, what are the sort of things that you think about when you were creating content to promote the Art Walk?
I would say, especially right now, being sensitive to what's going on in the world, and thinking about what people want to see right now and what they will connect with right now, and using that as your baseline. I've noticed a strong response using the Capitol Hill Art Walk platform to lift up other artists across the city, not just Capitol Hill, sharing resources that help artists, musicians, small business owners, creating content that's actually tangible and useful in the current moment is really important. And it doesn't have to just be businesses and organizations that are doing that. Individuals can do that as well. And I've seen a strong positive response to that. So.
That's great. Are there when you're doing that, like, do you guys you have your social media, and I assume you have a Facebook page. There is a Facebook page for the Art Walk that I've seen before and things like that. And do you have a designated standalone Twitter account for that, an Instagram account? Like, are those your primary channels, those three, or are you, do you guys do anything in TikTok or any other emerging platforms? I guess it's kind of weird to call TikTok an emerging platform at this point. It's so large. But, when you're thinking about those three channels, how far out, like, if you have the Art Walk coming up, tell us about, what does a month out look like, and what's your thinking into marketing that event?
As far as Art Walk in general, those are the three main channels that we use. I'm seeing a lot of galleries and small businesses branch out to include, Vimeo and YouTube, TikTok as well. I've heard some amazing success stories from TikTok videos being used to push a special event or a new series of work. So I think just having fun with that right now and experimenting is key because we all have to be adaptable but yeah, a month out, a month is a great amount of time right now to give people a heads up about what's coming up. Everyone's pretty stressed, and so keeping it timely is really important. Not too last minute. You want to give people a little bit of time to put something on their calendar and then do a reminder, and yeah.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. So again, we're going to pivot here and talk about music stuff more in a second, but I'm just kind of curious. So with the Art Walk, that was something that you said was subsidized by Capitol Hill Block Party and some other businesses. How did you go about engaging or cultivating businesses that wanted to participate in something like that? And were there any anecdotes or anything of people where they didn't necessarily see the value and then came back and said they were so happy that they were a part of it or something like that?
Yeah, well, the nice thing with the sponsorship is that it used to cost venues $25 a month to take part in Art Walk, and that would help cover marketing materials. But with the sponsorship, that cost was taken away, which was wonderful. So we saw a huge influx of new that wanted to participate because it was a free resource. Yeah, so that was a big thing. And then, sorry, like what was the second part to that? I have like a million things going.
I understand. That, you know, of cultivating businesses or locations, basically you're trying to find people that have wall space that you can hang art or floor space to. And were there any instances where, you know, you really had to convince somebody to be a part of it, and then they thought it was, after the fact, was like, oh, we should have been, you know, they saw the value in it and how it affected their customers or their perception of their business or things like that?
You know, we haven't really had anybody reluctantly join. And we haven't had any instances where a business was like, this is a waste of my time.
Right.
You know, something that Janine and I really try to remind folks of is that it is a team effort, and you do have to do promotion as well and encourage your artists to also self-promote. You know, it really has to be, you know, you can't just and then back and expect a really successful turnout. It takes everybody chipping in. So yeah, so I would say overall, we've had great positive feedback, and you know, when you know, hopefully post COVID, we're able to launch Art Walk again. We'll be able to really bring in some new, fresh businesses. And
there's so many things that I hope for post-COVID that I dream about every night. You know, yeah, but you know, but my hope simultaneously, it's just my opinion, but maybe people are going to come out with such vigor and energy to want to re-engage that maybe this will be a catalyst to get a bunch of stuff going that was a little
I hope so.
before.
You know, and there's, you know, a lot of us are able to be open now, you know, with limited capacity and social distancing. And I've had people come into the gallery almost in tears because they're so emotional, and they're saying that this is the first space they've visited since March, and they're so excited to just be out and looking at art in person and engaging. And that is really powerful. You know, and it's, I mean, a couple of wonderful customers have made me cry. So I think we are going to see a lot of that. Yeah.
Great. That's great. So let's pivot here to music a little bit. So you told us a little bit about your origin story about how you got involved working with Riot Act. So maybe just quickly tell us a little bit about Riot Act PR. I mean, you guys are in multiple cities across America, and I know you focus more probably on, well, actually, I don't know for sure. I mean, I know some of your clients, but maybe just tell us a little bit about the agency and the history, and that's a starting point.
And there's two of us here in Seattle. Okay.
I froze there for a second, sorry.
Okay.
So two of you here in Seattle?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Detroit and Athens. And, you know, we are a boutique PR firm, and so we work on a fan-first basis. So as individuals, we really want to enjoy the music personally before we agree to take on a client. You know, and we work independently, but we also lean on each other quite a bit for resources, and work as a team in that way as well.
Right. Maybe you just mention, if I haven't frozen again.
20 years.
Maybe just tell us a little bit about, you mentioned fan first. What does that mean exactly?
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, for me, I have to be able to connect with the music in order to sell it. So I really will listen. You know, we get submissions a lot, and I take my time and I listen through. And if it's something that I personally enjoy and I see potential, then, you know, I'll reach out. I think that's truly important, because you want someone to support you that actually believes in what you're doing and isn't just looking for the paycheck. It goes way beyond that. You know, you want to be able to establish that rapport and have a successful campaign.
Sure. So tell us a little bit. I mean, I think that one thing musicians often wonder about, you know, somebody once said to me that musicians are incredibly creative until the minute they have a piece of finished product in their hands. You know, they have a master tape or something, and then they're just blithering idiots. They don't know what to do with it, and they're like, well, we should release it or something. And so maybe talk us through a little bit about what's your guys' general thought process about how you start thinking when a record's coming out. And you know, back in the days, and I don't know if it's changed, you know, oftentimes you're thinking about a 3-month timeline.
Right.
And can you talk us through, and maybe that's changed. I mean, I'm maybe stuck in the old model a little bit more, but maybe talk us through a little bit about how you guys start thinking about when you're going to release something, and what the different sort of points along the way, and you know, in what kind of in a perfect world.
You know, 3 months is a good minimum. If you're looking at a full LP release, 3 months is a great, I would say 3 to 5 months is ideal lead time to release date. And, you know, typically there would be a few, you know, 2 to 3 singles chosen from the album to focus on, to release to the public leading up to that. You know, I'm seeing a lot more video content be along with those singles right now, which I think is great and a good idea if it's feasible. Without live shows, I think having the more visual content, it adds to your story and gives writers and your audience something to grab onto. And videos are just fun. I've seen some really, you know, creative content over the past 6 months. But yeah, you know, and then, you know, if you are working with a publicist, you know, giving them enough time to work the record for you. So thinking ahead and starting to look around for a publicist that's a good fit, you know, 6 months out, just to find somebody.
So let me ask you, I probably asked these questions in the wrong order in some ways. Excuse me. I mean, in some ways, there's the music that you're going to publicize, but in some ways you kind of have to make it interesting in some way or another.
Right.
Like you have to craft the story. So before you start thinking about the timeline of how you're going to send this to that person or that person, tell us a little bit about how do you think about that? How do you start thinking about how is this piece of music different than any of the other piece of music that you're releasing or being released, and how you know, trying to figure out that hook to get people interested in some way or another?
Yeah, you know, it is important to have a story and to be able to articulate in some way what you're trying to say with your music. And that's not easy. That is really difficult for a lot of people, and that's okay. So in that case, I recommend, you know, for musicians to find somebody that can put together a really good bio for you, that can outline you know, your influences and the inspirations behind why you made the record. You know, maybe something really intense has happened in your personal life that, you know, sparked the entire record. That's great. You know, talk about what you're comfortable talking about with that. And then the publicist's job is to then take that information and, you know, tap into our press network that we think would react to that and respond to that. And, you know, what outlets does that fit with? Like, oh yeah, this is a beautiful story, and, you know, let's try this, you know, this field of writers, and yeah.
Right. So is that a collaborative process, trying to distill that story between you and the artist, or do oftentimes they'll say, here's the record, you guys just figure it out? What's the best way? Where do you find the most value in that relationship between figuring that out?
I would say most times musicians approach me with that all in line, and I've been impressed. Their pitch to me has been, you know, and I think that this is something that is good for visual artists as well too, but really taking that time to put together your creative package before you're reaching out to publicists, before you're reaching out to galleries, or if you're doing PR on your own before reaching out to music outlets. You know, it hasn't been very often where you know, I don't write bios, and so if someone comes to me and they're like, here's this, and they don't really have anything to say about it, they just want to kind of get out in the world, there's actually a strong chance that I won't take on the client, because
right.
you know, I want that story to go along with it, or at least some idea, and I can help guide them, you know, to we'll maybe reach out to somebody who can help you put this together, and yeah, start there.
Totally. Well, and I mean, I assume, at least in my experience, and I assume you would agree, I could be wrong, but you know, this is not just music, this is anything, right? That if you're going out and trying to convince people to write about you in some way, like just opening a business for say, isn't necessarily enough news for somebody to write something about it. But if it's something that's unique and hasn't been done before, or is new to that area or something, then that's probably something that's more newsworthy than just something. And so, do you have any answers or thoughts where you've had to dig deep and really think like, man, where's the hook on this, and what you kind of came up with on a music side?
Sometimes, yeah. You know, I would say with some of my more experimental drone ambient projects that I've worked with, I've had to do more of that, because those are projects that tend to be a little bit less marketable to a wider audience. You really have to, in many cases, already be interested in that style of music to delve into it, because it can be pretty intense. So that has happened sometimes, and you know, in that case, I like to focus on the recording process that the artist used and go that route. You know, like, did they use any innovative equipment? What's their favorite gear? Where did they record it? Was it a nature situation, or you know, something a little more industrial, and branch out that way, because then you can always find a line there, like, oh, okay, well, if they used this insane gear, then that opens up, you know, 20 publications that I could reach out to that are gear focused, you know. Sure. So yeah.
Cool. What do you think the role, like, you know, maybe I'm going to use the wrong term, but kind of third-party validation? So like you mentioned, like where they recorded, or a producer they've worked with, or something that people might already know about, the way you can kind of capture that and use that association or that halo to bring awareness or something to the project you're working on. I mean, I assume that you know, in those cases, or if you can get somebody to give you a quote or something like that.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. And you know, with a specific engineer or producer, you know, there's that's well known. You know, you'll find a group of writers and outlets that are, you know, big fans, and they trust that person's taste, and so they're more likely to listen to the album because of that. Yeah, for sure. That all comes into play.
So let me ask you this from a strategy about, you know, if you're trying to build a story, and I mean, ultimately, you know that all the artists you work with aren't necessarily going to, you know, the music they make or whatever is never going to get them to the top 40 or something. Or but how do you kind of roll out a story? I mean, do you just like theoretically give it to everybody at once, or do you sometimes have an incremental approach where you want to seed it with certain people first and let them hear it and get their feedback and see if you can get some interest there, and that knowing that can kind of catapult in concentric circles out from there?
Yeah, when working with newer clients, or clients that have debuts coming out, I definitely like to start on a, you know, local, regional focused of where they're from, and you know, plug into that arena because that's where they live and work and produce music. And so that's a great starting point, and, you know, build a foundation out from there. At the same time though, I also am in most cases aiming high as well, because if depending on what genre they're working in, if there are writers that I know that are working on more of a national level, I'll definitely be hitting them up at the same time in the off chance that they might really connect. And that does happen, and it's really exciting when it happens because it broadens their audience pretty quickly.
Sure. Well, and it's amazing, there's like what you would call, taste making community, right? That there's certain people, if they like it, then everybody will be like, oh, well, if they like it, then I should check it out. And it's not always easy to get those people to do that, but it's probably good to know who those people are, right? So you at least know that. And so it's identifying those people that are gatekeepers in some way in your, whatever it is that you're marketing, whether it's theater or art or music or stuff like that. So I'd be curious. So, you've been doing this for a number of years now. You obviously have a bunch of relationships that you've built over that time working with different writers. You may have inherited some relationships from other people at the agency that were there at Riot Act when you started. But, what would you say for somebody that's like, like you could look up, the Seattle Times has some sort of email address you can submit stuff or things like that. How do you build those relationships? Maybe, I know nobody can do it overnight, and that's often why people hire a publicist, but if you were helping somebody, giving counseling somebody without doing the work for them, how would you suggest, what's the best way to try to build those relationships?
My number one key advice is to research the outlets first and see what they're covering. And see if it'll be a good fit potentially before reaching out. And most websites have, a masthead and a contact page, and a lot of music sites will be pretty specific with their submission guidelines. Attention to policy and how they want to be contacted, and that's 101 first off. You don't want to be wildly casting a wide net. Not only can that really waste time, but also you could turn off some writers. So many of these, especially now, there's been a really wild amount of layoffs, and there are fewer and fewer outlets that are able to take on new music and do coverage. So you really want to just take your time, do the research, compile a list of people that you think would actually be responsive to what you're doing, and then reach out that way. And it can take time, and it can take a couple of follow-up emails, unless they specify, please do not send follow-up emails. It's really,
Those fun ones. Yeah. I dropped my notes. I'm gonna grab them real quick. So
okay.
I'm not running away. I think that Zoom broke up a little bit when we were talking about like just finding email addresses on a website or things like that. And maybe you could just recap a little bit about starting to build. Maybe even just think about like in Seattle and the Seattle metropolitan area, if you were to start building a 5 or 10 outlet per person press list, who would you think about for somebody that was wanting to send music out to do that?
Yeah, for sure. Seattle, there isn't a lot currently, and hopefully that will change. But you want to, just get on the internet, and what publications do you like to read? Where do you like to get your music information, both locally and nationally, and start there. But reaching out to The Stranger and reaching out to Seattle Times, Seattle Met, there's a lot of great options, but just really digging into the site and finding those people, and having yourself organized before reaching out,
Right. Well,
make sure you're
and I feel that it's trying to think about the different angles, right? And that you might have an artist that's, a great musician, but they might have such a visual style or something that might make them more interesting to an art publication or to a fashion publication or things like that. So I assume you're trying to like figure out how you can cut the apple up in different ways and get different people to bite in one way or another.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I've had quite a few clients that are, they're strong musicians, and they're also filmmakers and also fashion designers. And so, just using all of that and reaching out to, that variety of publications is really fun.
So let's just take it way down to like a sort of entry level. When you're getting ready to do a campaign, let's just identify the elements that you're going to be sending out to somebody, right? So we talked about a press release, right? And maybe just quickly, if you were to give a 10-word description of what a press release, what information and how long is that? Is it 20 pages? Is it 1 page? What do you usually do?
For sure, 1 page. Have a really strong bio that's not too long. Just keep it to the point but interesting, and highlight some things that make you stand out. Having some really great press photos that are high res, and I also recommend having portrait and landscape options, because there are certain outlets that prefer those different styles. You want to have your social media links included in there: Facebook, Instagram. I strongly recommend Bandcamp. If you have videos, either YouTube or Vimeo.
You're not servicing any physical product at this point. It's all links.
It's all digital. Yeah, and if you're servicing a single, having a link to that single, a pre-order link to your album if you're doing an album announcement, that kind of thing.
Would you give I've had people say to me at different points that an ideal press release, if that with a few edits, could become an article pretty quickly. Do you kind of believe in that you almost want to be ghostwriting an article that somebody could write in your press release?
I do. I see that happen quite a bit. And you would hope that the writer who's covering you branches out beyond. But yeah, I mean, having all that essential info in there is super important, because there are going to be situations where, even if it's just like, there's a lot of sites that just share your Bandcamp embed and then a link to your website, and that's great. But other sites will want to take it a little bit further and hopefully do an interview and, expand beyond.
So maybe for the folks listening, what's the average press cycle? So we talked about, in a perfect world, you'd have between 3 and 6 months prior to the release of something. How long are you doing something after you release it? And then sort of what's the work that's done on the back end as opposed to all the prep work you do on the front end?
Yeah, so that's actually something that's been changing quite a bit that I'm seeing, because, pre-COVID, what we saw a lot is, an album would come out on a Friday, and then we would see reviews trickling in that week leading up, and then the following week after, and then over that 30 days or so after the album is out, any trickling coverage coming in. What I've been seeing over the past 6 months is a lot of later incoming coverage, which is wonderful, because that's something that publicists want to see, is, have it carry on as long as possible and keep people engaged and keep record sales going for as long as possible. And sometimes, something fun you can do is, after the album is out and it's been a few weeks, maybe release a new piece of merch to go along with the album to kind of re-spark some interest, or, it can be trickier to get new, fresh coverage after the album is already out. But but we are seeing that happen more often lately.
Well, and obviously we're in COVID now and nobody's touring, but I guess in a perfect cycle, right, you'd do this work and then there'd be a tour that starts a couple months after the release, so that you get another bite at the apple that way. Do you ever like reservice, in the sense that if you get some enthusiastic press from more smaller publications or tastemaker publications, that you might send that out to larger papers saying, look at all the attention it's getting at this level, you might want to take another look, even if they turned it down the first time around?
Yeah, I've certainly done that before. That week after an album is already out is usually when I'll do something like that and be like, this just came out, And that's more of a, in case you missed it. And that has worked before, where it'll catch a writer and they're like, yes, I had this bookmarked, but I didn't have time to get to it before. And, thank you for resending. And that's always great. Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, obviously the Seattle region was so, just stuff being from Seattle at one point in the 90s was of interest to people. Do you feel like there's any regional interest from a regionalism standpoint in music that's created here at this point? Or do you feel like that's kind of subsided to a point, and being from Seattle isn't necessarily enough on its own to get somebody to take a look at something?
No, there's a lot of pride here still, and I think that carries out for sure throughout the country. And we have pretty strong Canadian contacts as well. I think that's still very relevant, and especially because the music scene here is so diverse and amazing, that I feel like that's only getting stronger, and that's a real source of pride for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to, just with the work we do with Black Fret and, trying to magnify and support emerging artists, that I'm so impressed of how Seattle has, and the Seattle music scene, the larger metropolitan area, has evolved from being a monoculture to a much more varied genre and participants than it was before. And so that's really exciting to me, that there's a lot more voices in the room than there were before. I was thinking, we've got a little bit more time. I could talk to you all day. I love talking about this stuff. We could, if anybody has any questions as we're going on, they're welcome to put them into the chat. Whether that's any of our audience or our other participants. And I guess I'd just be curious, so what are you hearing within the industry at this point about, nobody has a crystal ball and knows when COVID is going to end and what that feels like. But where is the energy going right now in terms of where people think they're going to be able to start working again in some way or another? Or have you seen any really interesting hybrids that people have done in the meantime?
I'm seeing things all across the board. Really nobody knows. I'm hearing possibly summer 2021 for some touring. Other folks are like 2022, no way, not until there's a vaccine in place. It's intense. And I think a lot of people are feeling worried, and obviously, especially considering our live venues that are really in trouble. It's scary to think about. I think right now, the industry is trying to hybridize, like you mentioned, with more larger scale outlets offering live streams through their site. NPR's Tiny Desk at Home series that's been happening here. John in the Mornings, KXP on his lawn series that's happening here. There's an involvement of great other creative outlets, and I think that's going to continue to grow because we have no choice. Like we have to adapt and evolve because we don't know how much longer this is going to go on, and hopefully we'll see some stronger assistance from the cities and to save our venues and get touring back and safe live shows. But yeah.
Sure. Well, I say, as a resident of Shoreline and someone that likes this city, we have a couple good development rooms here, under 300 cap rooms where artists, when they're first getting going, really start to hone their craft. And I think that, it's what I'm optimistic about is that hopefully we can keep those spaces alive. Because ultimately it's big business, right? So that at the top of the pyramid, there's always going to be people that can put, the Lady Gagas and the Maroon 5s into rooms around the world, and people will buy those tickets and go to them. But it's
right.
How do we create this sort of assembly line in the best sense of the word about where people can start and then work their way through that process? And I think that one of the things that's excited me about the work we've been trying to support in Shoreline is that as Seattle gets more and more expensive, I mean, you living on or working on Capitol Hill, you know how that has changed dramatically. What used to be an arts-focused community has so gentrified this period of time, and so our creatives need places to be, and so it's really exciting to me the thoughts that you know where the next interesting thing could be, whether it's in Shoreline or White Center or one of these other places where more interesting stuff is happening. Let me ask you this. So we talked about the press release, we talked about the photos, we talked about the links. In terms of doing that, is if you were to be able to get in a time machine and go back, what would you, when you were first starting PR, were there any pearls of wisdom that you would tell yourself then that you know now in terms of, you know, when to let something breathe, when to push, you know? I mean, I think that's always the tough start because this is people involved, right? It's personal relationships. I'd just be curious if you have any sort of a wisdom that way.
You know, I would say just having confidence in your vision and having confidence in your taste and your experience, and trusting in that, and also not being afraid to reach out to your music community and your art community and share resources and ask for help and get advice, and also to just, you know, there are no set rules with a lot of this, to be flexible. You know, you don't have to, you know, if you have this amazing album and you're sitting on it, you know, you don't put it out when it feels right to you. Also, you know, just paying attention to what's going on in the world. And, you know, I ran into a lot of situations with clients where they, you know, they had release dates for March and April, and, you know, they were completely panicked and felt like they had to forge ahead and put out the album anyway, but they were completely stressed out about it. And I was like, then just wait, you know, like it's not going to be enjoyable for you or your audience if it feels forced and the timing's not right. And yeah, so those are important.
Do you, when you decide that you told us a little bit about how you decide to work on a project, do you ever provide feedback to people why you don't want to work on a project in terms of, I don't know, just sometimes, because to me, sometimes I think there's this process that we want to support stuff, be supportive, but to me, being supportive sometimes is to give critical feedback or things as well. I mean,
yeah, for sure. I'd like to be really transparent.
What's your thought on that?
You know, this happens with visual artists as well too. When I'm curating a show, you know, transparency is important, and it's also respectful. You know, so if I get, you know, something in my inbox and I listen and I'm not connecting with it, I let them know politely, and, you know, suggest like, oh, maybe try this or try that, or, you know, a lot of follow-up questions will be like, well, can you recommend anybody else? And, you know, I might give a few names if I feel like that's appropriate. But yeah, it's important to be open to providing feedback, because again, we're all in this together, and it's really difficult to put yourself out there. And I especially now, I mean, if anybody's creating music right now and running a small business and making art, I applaud you because, you know, and I really want to respect that and provide a nice answer. And yeah.
Great. Well, I'd say we've got a little time left, but thought if anybody has any questions, we'd be happy to. Or I thought we also have if Todd, who's helping us out tonight, or I see a couple other folks. Sorry, go ahead, Matt.
Just to say, I was going to go ahead and restart the recording to make sure that we captured every golden nugget of word there, of course. And I did want to encourage anyone on the call to jump in. Wanted to thank you for the opportunity for allowing me to be your Zoom master tonight. And I wanted to say that from the outside in, you know, having started Black Fret here in Austin, Texas, and having run it for over 8 years now with my co-founder, Colin Kendrick, so many of the truths so many of the things you talked about today both felt like truth and completely subjective, you know, and I think that's one of the beauties of art. We're all going to find our own personal journey through that. We're all going to find our own way through that. And to me, it really comes back to the community that we're building to support it, because we can't do it alone. Sometimes it is hard to find honest criticism, or even accept that criticism. And without all these pieces coming together, I think we'd all struggle more. What are some of the, just if we have another second, what are some of the inspirational things to you about how the Seattle community is coalesced around its artists, and how people can help foster that and make that happen a little bit more?
We're really lucky here in Seattle. I've seen such a strong coming together across both the visual art and the music community. There's been a lot of, we're kind of in the Pike Pine corridor here. And so a lot of us see each other every day, coming and going. And so, we're sharing resources, and, we're leaning on each other. We're commiserating, and lifting each other up as much as we can via our social media platforms and in person. And I'm sure this is happening across most communities, but it really feels like kind of a circling of the wagons in a sense, and focusing on home and what's around you immediately, and what you can do right now to help out your neighbors and your community, because art is essential, music is essential. We need each other. So whatever we can do to keep those bridges intact is absolutely vital right now.
Well, what's interesting, Laurie, is you mentioned Pike Pine Corridor, and I'll say that, I moved to Seattle in 1989, right when I graduated from college, and ended up landing in that neighborhood and spent a good time over the next 20 years there. But, in 1989, there was like one bar and one or two restaurants and some auto. You guys still there? Sorry, everybody froze. But just that over time, that it was the art and the culture that drew people to that neighborhood, and how it grew. Now it's this much more, became highly desirable for people from whatever walk of life to live there. And, there was a funny point where there was the Comet Tavern that was on Capitol Hill. There was a point when Linda Dershang opened a bar called Linda's, and there was a lot of talk, could Capitol Hill support 2 bars? and now there's like 1,000 of them, right? So
right.
I think that, the world is constantly changing, and that, art and expression and culture are important drivers in that, and how we are stewards of that and help support keeping the creative people around, even though they may be a little bit more vulnerable in what they can offer to the community at different points from a money standpoint. So your point on community is very well taken.
Absolutely. In fact, I would encourage even everybody on the call to, well, it might be harder and harder to make money in the music industry. You are the drivers of local economies. You're the drivers of cool. You're the drivers that make people who come to a convention in your city think it's cool. That has value. And I think that the work that that you're doing, Laurie, we're all trying is make sure that coolness is recognized, that it's recognized, that it's valued. So I keep fighting the good fight with us, because we all need to be in it together.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is where I feel like I'm on talk radio or something. Sorry. So with that being said, Nate, can I put you on the spot for a second?
Yeah.
Are you?
Was that the whole?
Yeah, I was to say, if I put you on
pudding?
no. Maybe, I think that we really appreciate the support that you're trying to provide to the music community through the City of Shoreline, but maybe you can talk a little bit about your thinking. You deal with economic development on all levels, and where you see the role music playing and helping Shoreline continue to evolve and grow into a even better version of what it is right now.
Well, I grew up on Capitol Hill, and I spent my formative years bouncing around. I was too young to go to those bars, but I remember when there were 2 coffee shops. Now there's an equal number of those too. And open mics and poetry readings and all that stuff was totally normal and kind of everywhere available on Capitol Hill in that Pike Pine area. Amongst some of the auto shops, REI was still up there, different scene, but and definitely it really resonates with me what you were talking about, Ben, about how the culture and the desirability is all wrapped up and leads to economic growth and opportunity. And I think that so you asked me for my thinking. I'm still kind of on this journey of, and you know this, was in working together to prepare for this series and this year's work around music, stumbled across more recording studios in Shoreline, and then in kind of looking at our business information about business community that we have, found more even still, and other music related businesses, cultural kind of institutions around dance, around education, but events, kind of Bollywood sort of party events company. I mean, there's just so many different things that I'm still discovering, and I think that what I'm still trying to figure out is to understand the business community that we have in the music and cultural environment, and it's really strong, but it's not cohesive, and it's not, from what I've found. I haven't found someone to be the representative of the community who can tell me all about it. I'm still having to piece it together and find it. And so I think that I know sort of this hypothesis of the value of it, but to understand it better, and what the folks who are doing the work and who are the scene in Shoreline, what they're up to, who they are, what they're doing, and what would be meaningful. And I guess, so Laurie, that's a question that kind of kept coming back into my mind as you were talking. Are there things that the city of Seattle or King County or For Culture or the state of Washington, are there some government, you mentioned cities saving venues. We don't have any money because the venues aren't paying taxes. So we don't have any money to give out to anybody, but are there things we can be doing that are supportive, and selfishly, so that we can turn the tax money faucet back on? Ultimately, that's the long game and the whole justification for why this is economic development in the first place. Mm-hmm. But what do you consider to be supportive things that you've seen, and anybody that wants to chime in? Like I said, I'm interested in hearing from people who are the ones who are doing the work and creating the creative energy, and what are the things that are helpful?
I would say walk the beat and actually go out and introduce yourself to a lot of these business owners and recording engineers, and as much as you can, and put a face to it and have conversations with them is really important. It's not something I see very often. So when I get an email from the GSBA, I'm a block away from where CHOP was, so we've been having that extra challenge of our location, and the GSBA is the only organization that reached out to just ask how I was doing, and I think that is huge. So I think just making as many personal connections as you can by just personally reaching out is very supportive, because then those people feel seen and heard, and just starting from there, asking them what they need. And I was asked, do you need cleanup supplies? Do you need help fixing any broken things, or do you need any social media bumps, that kind of thing. It's just, it can be a little bit of reaching out can go a long way, for sure.
Well, and you never know. I mean, to me, about living in Shoreline in particular, is that I've lived here since 2005, and there's still gems that are uncovered that I didn't know. I mean, and I consider food to be a part of culture as well, right? So interesting thing. And so the Seattle Times wrote an article a couple weeks ago about the top, I forget if it was 30 or 100 banh mi sandwich places in the Northwest, or in Seattle, and they chose the place in Shoreline as the #1 place to go to. This tiny little place right by Costco that maybe 2 people could fit inside with the staff, and they were inundated. There was a line, they didn't know what hit them. Yeah. But it was cool that they found this, that's we live in a world of explorers, right? Where people want to find these unique, interesting things. And we all have to just be better at maybe prospecting, and sometimes the most interesting stuff is the stuff we can't see, right? So it's
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, right on. To finish up here in a few moments, I wanted to say that per Nate, what you were saying is that we are going to do 2 more of these events in October, and one of them is going to be specifically featuring people from recording studios in Shoreline, and some of the folks that we've, I want to say discovered, which is maybe not the best way to describe it, but people that we've become aware of more recently, on top of the sort of couple studios that a lot of big records get made in here. And so looking really forward to that dialogue. And then we're going to have one more of these discussions with Chuck Zimmerman, who runs Northwest Polite Society and does a lot of street marketing and things for businesses, as a way of thinking about other low-cost alternatives to get your message out to the people. With that being said, Laurie, I can't thank you enough for coming and joining us tonight and giving us your, sharing your wisdom with us on all of this sort of stuff. It's been really fantastic. I can say personally that I can't tell you how good it is just to see faces after being locked in the house perpetually.
Yeah.
And to be talking about stuff that's that is very dear to my heart, and hopefully it is to everybody else's as well. And I guess lastly, Nate, thank you so much to the City of Shoreline and the Port of Seattle for supporting this work.
And the Shoreline Chamber of Commerce.
And the Shoreline Chamber of Commerce,
Yes.
forgive me. They've been great in this process as well, and we're working to get some more music-related businesses involved with the Chamber as well, because we think that will yield great results for everybody involved. But this is how it starts. I mean, this is the funny part. It's small groups of people talking about ideas that grow into larger things. So thank you, everybody that came out tonight. And I look forward to seeing this again. But Laurie, thank you so much. And Laurie, if people wanted to get in touch with you for any reason, they go to Riot Act Media, they could go to the webpage, or
yeah,
you want
yeah,
to
they can go to riotmedia.com. Yep, and my email's on there, and Twitter, and yeah.
Great. Nate, do you have anything that you want to add before we tune out for the night?
Just thank you, everybody, and stay tuned. And the door is open. I do want to meet all of you, everyone who joined us tonight. If we haven't met before, my contact information is also on our website, City of Shoreline. That's shorelinewa.gov. You can find me easily in the business section of the website. On all the pages there have my email and phone number. Please do reach out. I'd like to know more about you and your business and what I can do to help in any way I can.
Great. Well, thanks everybody for coming. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Laurie. It's great to see you. And thanks, Matt, for being our webmaster tonight. And everybody have a great night.
Nice job, Matt.
Thanks,
And
Matt.
don't forget to vote. All right. See you soon.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.